Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Safe with Jen. In recent weeks, I asked my followers a question through a poll. Would you rather me make faux peanut butter cups, or did you want to know how to make chocolate chip cookies without eggs? And the results are in, and they're overwhelming. 3-1, you all like your chocolate chip cookies. So that's what I'm going to do today. Our recipe today is going to be egg-free, peanut-free, and gluten-free. Now, this recipe does not have any tree nuts in it. However, the flour that I'm using is actually cross-contaminated with almond and hazelnut, okay? So there aren't any tree nuts in it, but there is cross-contamination, so I just wanted to make you all aware, okay? But if you switch out, if you don't need this recipe to be gluten-free, and you switch out to your regular flour, you certainly would now have a tree nut-free recipe as long as it wasn't cross-contaminated, and you just would swap out the flour 1-to-1, okay? So 2.5 cups of this gluten-free flour is 2.5 cups to your regular flour, okay? So just a little tip. Okay, so let's just call these peanut and egg-free, gluten-free chocolate chip cookies, okay? We're gonna start with our 2 sticks of butter. Now here's one thing that I want to impress upon you about using butter in any of your recipes when you're cooking for somebody with food allergies. You wanna make sure you're using fresh sticks right out of the package. Butter sticks are a really high cross-contamination risk just because people use their butter for toast or bagels, and there's nuts and gluten and eggs and those sort of ingredients, okay? So you should be using fresh sticks anyway, but let's just make sure that for this recipe, we're doing it, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and put in 2 sticks of butter, and I'm gonna beat those. So another tip that I need to talk to you about when you are cooking or baking for somebody with food allergies, your mixer is a big cross-contamination risk, okay? So in the little crevices, as you're mixing, the flour and the butter and the sugar, the eggs, they get everywhere, right? In the little vents here, okay? And so you wanna make sure that you're not using your regular mixer when you're cooking for somebody with food allergies. There's 2 options. You can have another one. They're relatively inexpensive, so if you are going to be baking for somebody quite a bit, just have one on hand, have it in a case that's labeled. Or in this case, you would have to use a fork or a spoon, okay? Stainless steel. Rinse them, wash them underneath the hot water with soap. Clean them with a paper towel, dry paper towel. If you don't have new sponges on hand, a good point of reference for all of my allergy recipes is to check out my video about prepping your kitchen. You'll get a lot of tips there, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and start mixing with our clean, safe mixer. Okay, so now that we're done mixing up and whipping up our butter, we're gonna go ahead and add the sugars that we have. Just one note about the butter. Make sure that you're whipping it until smooth, until it's whipped, but give it another extra 30 seconds because you want the air to get through the butter so that you get softer cookies, okay? So what we're doing is adding 2 types of sugars. Simple. It's probably something that you're very familiar with. You're adding both white and brown sugar to the recipe. We're gonna do 3/4 of a cup for each of them, okay? So I add the white sugar first, I mix that around, and then I add the brown sugar. Make sure that you're doing a firmly packed 3/4 cup of your brown sugar, okay? Okay, so now that we're done combining all of the sugar and butter together, we are gonna start to talk about what we're substituting out. Instead of using egg, we're gonna use a secret ingredient. First things first though, we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. Okay, and make sure that it's a vanilla that isn't cross-contaminated. Okay, make sure you've done your research, made phone calls, things like that. And then here's the trick. It's applesauce. It's really, really simple. It's easy. Here's the trick though. So we know that applesauce, a lot of us know, some of us don't know, can be an egg replacer. Typically recipes call for a 1 tablespoon to 1 egg ratio. That doesn't work, okay? I have baked tons of cookies, tons of cupcakes, tons of brownies over the years for my son. And that ratio just doesn't work out. It really is 3 to 1. Okay. This recipe happens to call for 2 eggs, so we're going to do 6 tablespoons of applesauce in our recipe. So what we're going to do is just make sure that we're combining it all together. You might not be used to the texture of the dough after you're done mixing it all together. Typically, with the egg, you would get more of like a whipped sort of feel, but here you might not feel that, but that's okay, because once we add the flour, it will all combine and feel good, okay? So once you're done mixing the batter for about 2 minutes on medium, this is the sort of consistency that you're gonna have. Like I said, it's not gonna look like when you typically have eggs in there. It might look a little separated, but really, don't worry. Once we add the flour, we'll be back on track. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is add our flour mixture. We have 2.5 cups of flour. Typically a recipe for cookies will call for a 2.25 cup of flour, but you want to add a little bit extra flour in a recipe when you're not using egg, just to give it a little bit more binding, okay? So we're going to do 2.5 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of salt. We're going to do that in a separate bowl, and we're just going to mix it all together. Many of you sift. Martha Stewart sifts. Ina Garten, I'm sure she sifts. And I love them both so much. I don't sift, so I just mix it all together, and they turn out just fine. If you do, this would be the point in which you did it, okay, but I'm not going to do that here. Okay, I just kind of take my spoon, and I gently bring it all together, okay? One thing that I want to teach you about your flour, this is what's going to give you airy cakes and cupcakes for other recipes, and this will give you a chewy cookie. When you're measuring out flour, do not take your cup and dip it into your bag or in your container, whatever you have on hand. The right way to measure flour is to take your cup, you take a spoon, and you put it into the cup, okay? And you measure it this way. You would, of course, do this prior to your sifting. If you sift, I don't sift. We know that, right? You just kind of level it off, okay? That's how you're going to measure your flour, right? So what I'm going to do is take, this is a 3/4 cup measure. I just had it out from the sugar. I take about 3/4 of a cup at a time. I put it into our wet ingredients, mix them all together. Continue that until all of the flour is done, and then we'll get to the chocolate chips. Okay, so now we've mixed all of our dry ingredients with our wet ingredients, and as promised, it does look like a typical chocolate chip cookie dough. So as you can see here, the cookie dough has the same consistency that you would be used to if using eggs in your recipe. So this is the part where we add our chocolate chips. Chocolate chips are another area where you're going to need to focus on cross-contamination, okay? Not all companies label for may contain or produced in the same facility as. And so there are very sensitive kids who would have reactions to those sort of ingredients. So you want to make sure that you're using a chocolate chip that is free from the top 8 allergens, or whatever your allergens are. There are many brands out there that are safe that you could choose from. I happen to be using one that is free from top 8. There are some that are free from a lot of the allergens like peanut, tree nut, egg, but they have milk in them. So if milk is an allergen you're concerned about, you wouldn't want to use those chocolate chips, okay? So we're going to use our top 8 free chocolate chip cookies in this, chocolate chips rather, in this recipe. We're just going to pour them all in and stir them up. Okay, so now that we've mixed all of our chocolate chips into the dough, all that's left for us to do is to take a clean teaspoon or tablespoon, whatever you have, and however big you want your cookies to be. You could also use a scooper, as long as it's all clean, and put them on the cookie sheet. It's as easy as that. It's ungreased, okay? A couple tips though, things that I need you to pay attention to. Make sure that you resist the urge to let little fingers get into this dough at any point of the recipe, okay? While you are making the recipe, while you are putting the dough on the cookie sheet. Resist the urge yourself to sneak a taste, because then that just means that your dough is now contaminated, because we don't know what you've eaten or your children have eaten to make this risky, okay? So one exciting thing about this dough, however, is the fact that it has no egg in it means that it is safe to eat raw, right? So a lot of times we don't want our kids to eat the raw dough because it has eggs in it. So here's a little trick. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a scoop and I want you to put it in a dish on the side, and that can be the dough that everybody gets to eat, okay? Your kids can dip spoons in there, they can lick off of that one. You are just not gonna do it anywhere here, right? You can also make, you could turn this recipe into a second recipe, and you can take that dough and mix it with bananas, oats, roll them up. If you're not allergic to nuts, you can add nuts in there, roll them up in little balls and pop them in the fridge, and they're good for a couple of days. I would say up to 3 days. You could even freeze them. You could turn them into little protein balls if you wanted to with the nuts, or a sort of protein powder that's not cross-contaminated. But because it doesn't have raw egg, it gives us more possibility, okay? So just keep all of that in mind. So what I'm gonna do is just start. I have clean, fresh hands, okay? I am going to start putting, you can see the consistency of the dough here. It's similar to as if you had egg in it. So I'm going to put about a tablespoon of dough in each of my cookies. I am pretty old school. I just take the spoon with my clean hands and I just press it on to the cookie sheet like that, okay? You wanna make sure, as with any recipe, you are giving about 1 inch to 2 inches in between each cookie, okay? And then we go ahead and fill up the sheet. We just slide it right off, okay? You have to make sure your hands are clean in order to do it that way. The other thing you could do is one of those little melon ballers. If you don't want to touch the dough, you could do that as well. Some people like to chill their dough prior to putting it on the cookie sheet. You certainly could do that here as well with this one. I don't do it. I don't find it necessary for this recipe. But you certainly could if you wanted to. Okay. So all I'm going to do is finish up putting these on the cookie sheet. I'm going to pop them in the oven, and when we come back, we will have delicious, soft, hot, out of the oven chocolate chip cookies that were made without it. So our cookies just came out of the oven. We baked them at 375 for about 10 minutes. The reason you don't want to go any longer than 10 minutes is because we're looking for an ooey gooey soft chocolate chip cookie, okay? And that softness is going to last days later, I promise you. With the gluten-free flour, you might not get as long of a soft cookie. After probably a day or two, they might turn a little bit crunchy on you, but with the regular flour, you're going to get them throughout, okay? And the way that we get those soft cookies, remember, is we are using extra applesauce that a typical replacement would be, okay? So I'm just taking a few of these off and putting them on the cooling rack, and then we'll give one a taste. So, I'm going to take this and watch. You're not going to hear any crisp. You see it fall apart. So soft. It's still a little hot, so be careful. So good. I promise you, this is the cookie that you are going to want in your repertoire. So remember to visit our website, Safe with Jen, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Safe with Jen, so you can get up-to-date tips and recipes on how to keep it simple, keep it smart, and keep it safe for those with food allergies. Thanks for hanging. Take care.